So there's the underlying crisis. Now, Keynes always said that investing in a modern capitalist economy is always a risky business, and that he said that actually that there are all sorts of possible that investment shortfalls can result from any number of factors. The fear that the market either is or soon will be saturated. The assessments of possible expansion are limited, and for example, if workers are too well organised, the wage demands will be too high, and the capacity to compete will be damaged, and so on. But on the other hand, the reverse is also true. That in fact any lessening of investment leads to a vicious circle which drags down employment, income and spending, undermines business confidence, and leads to economic slowdown and further decline in investment. Now, this has been described as Keynes's stagnation thesis, and in fact what post-Keynesian, a number of post-Keynesian economists summarised it as is that the long-run development is not inherent in the capitalist economy. So actually, even though the drive within capitalism is to continually expand, the fact is that ongoing development is not its normal not its normal state. Its normal state is at a point of crisis. So thus said some of the neo-Keynesian and Marxist economists of the 40s and 50s, specific development factors are required to sustain a long-term upward movement. And it did seem that after the Second World War, when we reached this golden age, those of us of a certain age sort of were brought up in a world which seemed to be, we took it for granted that things were going to get better all the time. They might not be as we wanted it, it might not be going as well or as fairly as we wanted, but there's this assumption that the world was going to get steadily better off forever. And the concerns about stagnation that dominated economic thought before the war largely evaporated. So there was a sort of neoclassical Keynesian synthesis, and like when I went to my first economics lecture in 1961, I was told that modern economics was all about ensuring the continuation of full employment and controlled economic growth. That was all it was. It was simply it was a bit like, you know, that modern engineering is simply about changing the oil every 6 months. So capitalism had survived its great crisis, and it seemed to be thriving as never before. But a number of people said, well, actually rejected this view. And in the United States, two economists, Barron and Sweezy, wrote a very important book called Monopoly Capital, and Michael Kidron in this country developed, in his book Western Capitalism Since the War, argued that the enormous productivity of the mature capitalist economy combined with oligopolistic pricing generated a huge and ever-growing surplus, which was beyond the capacity of the economy to absorb. In other words, there was a crisis of overproduction. And even when government civilian spending was included in the equation, the effective demand remained insufficient. So something was needed to be injected into the economy to maintain stability, to maintain growth. And in this country, Michael Kidron developed the theory of the permanent arms economy. And he said that arms production was an absolutely critical factor in stabilizing and stimulating at the same time the economy. And Barron and Sweezy looked at a whole number of other factors in the United States, and one of the key factors that they looked at as well was the factor of financialization. and that is if you were making profit, which you couldn't reinvest in additional production, could be, and the rate of profit on new investment, if that was tending to fall, then you looked for something else to do with it. And what did you do? What would you do with it? Well, of course, you started to deal in stocks and shares, and in futures, and in assets generally, in the paper representation of things. So stocks and shares and property. And so that process of turning the economy on its head, and rather than production money actually being used to lubricate production, it actually became increasingly, finance started to become independent of production. Come the 1970s, the system broke, and profits had declined dramatically. And in this country, we saw after the oil crisis the new phenomenon of stagflation. So inflation linked to growing stagnation in the economy. And in both sides, what you saw at that time was the triumph of the monetarist economists, and the triumph of monetarism, and which had turned into Reaganomics in the United States and Thatcherism in this country, and both had exactly the same objective: to have a major transfer of wealth from incomes and wages to profits, in order to renew the profit rate. And it was very successful. By the mid-80s, profit levels in Britain had returned to their 1959 levels. And to do that, of course, we all know what happened about on one hand, attacking trade unions, about deliberately causing unemployment, but also deregulating, taking all the brakes off, actually cutting the brake lines on the brakes of the financial system. And so what we got from the late 1970s onward, both across the world, but in particular in the Anglo-Saxon economies, the Britain and the United States, we saw this flood of investment into assets, and that, of course, increasingly you found new ways. So John Bellamy Foster and Harry Magdoff wrote an extremely good book called The Great Financial Crisis, which was published a few months ago, talking about the United States. He said, they say, during the last 30 years or so, the economic surplus controlled by corporations and in the hands of institutional investors has poured in an ever-increasing flow into an exotic array of financial instruments. Little of the vast economic surface was used to expand investment, which remained in a state of simple reproduction geared to mere replacement. With corporations unable to find the demand for their output and therefore confronted with a dearth of profitable investment opportunities, the process of net capital formations became more and more problematic. Hence, profits were increasingly directed away from investment in the expansion of productive capacity and towards financial speculation. And now we see what resulted, because what resulted was huge financial bubbles and, of course, huge property bubble, and the two linked. And like when very large bubbles link together, they almost always do the same thing, which is pop, and that's what we're experiencing.